Welcome to Chapter 1, Introduction to Educational Research. The purpose of this course is to fulfill obviously the objectives of the syllabus, but also to form yourself as professional researchers, as connoisseurs of research, people that are educated in reading research, even though you yourself are not maybe necessarily interested in becoming a researcher. What is research? Research is an organized, systematic inquiry directed at answering well-framed questions. The entire whole purpose of the research enterprise is really to improve the lives of people, the lives of institutions, and it all starts with that well-framed question. Well, research also, why do we do it? It's in the information society that we live in, it is fundamental in order to be able to advance who we are, in order to improve our processes. It's important not just in education, but in all areas of research, in all areas of the arts, in all areas of society. And the scientific method, there's a precise definition here. The scientific method is an orderly process entailing a number of steps: recognition and definition of a problem, formulation of a hypothesis, not necessarily in the qualitative side, but definitely on the quantitative side, collection of data, analysis of data, and a statement of the conclusions, okay, regarding confirmation and disconfirmation of the hypotheses. Limitations, everything in life has limitations, including research. Limitations of the scientific method is it does not answer all questions. There are questions that perhaps those of moral, ethical nature, such as should we have the death penalty? No research study. You can maybe study how people think about the death penalty, but not whether we should have it in and of itself. No method captures the full richness of reality. Particularly on the quantitative side, is a little bit more disconnected from the actual people and sort of human phenomenon that qualitative research captures. Measuring instruments always trying to be improved, but always have some degree of error, and may always have degree of error because the human sciences, the social sciences, are not a perfect science. How do we apply what is the process for educational research and the scientific method? So the definition of educational research is the formal systematic application of the scientific method to the study of educational problems. And there are steps. The step one is selecting and defining a problem. Number two is executing the procedures. Three is analyzing the data. As four is drawing and stating conclusions as you see them, as you understand them, as the data tells you what those conclusions are. Quantitative and qualitative is two of the major areas of research that exist. Quantitative deals more with numerical data, requires large samples of people. Qualitative data requires smaller numbers of people, get more into the richness of the experience, understanding sort of the nuances in terms of human lives. Particularly, we're talking about human subjects research here. Okay. Make sure you understand the difference here between these two, that you'll definitely be tested on quantitative and qualitative, and understanding that quantitative really, if you break it down, that means quantity. Quantity means large amounts of data, large amounts of information. Qualitative breaks down into quantity, means that you have less, but those situations that you have are of high quality. The types of research, we're going to review first quantitative and then qualitative, and these are not particular to those two, but generally you're going to find most of these in those areas. So first is survey research. Everybody's taken surveys. Generally, you're selecting from 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 answers. A lot of the quizzes that you have are sort of, that type of selection where you don't have a choice. It's closed-ended. So you have some open-ended questions in survey research, but not generally. Generally, you're going to have the closed-ended questions. Correlational research. How does moving one variable affect another variable, right? So McDonald's, if you look at McDonald's, they know that they can lower the price of the hamburgers and raise the price of the fries, because everybody that buys hamburgers also buys fries. Am I right? Those two are sort of relational. There's a correlation between one and another, one and the other, and everybody buys a Coke too. That's why the Cokes cost so much, so much little to produce, and they cost so much, because that's generally what people talk about, the same as like the movies and buying popcorn. There's relationships like that, similar in research and similar in correlational research. Then you have causal comparative research. How does the cause, you have one thing causing another, but also a comparison between the two. How does one compare to two, compare to three? So it's both of these, looking at both the causation of one variable to another, of one site to another, but also the comparison between one to another. Experimental, this is very basic and fundamental, and a lot of the ones that we're reviewing right now, we're going to review them. We're going to spend a whole week reviewing them. This is really just a summary. Experimental, you have two basic types of experimental: true experimental research and quasi-experimental research. And if you look up the word quasi, that stands for somewhat. This is still really good research. The key thing here in true research is you have random assignment, and on quasi you don't. Sometimes in schools we use a lot of quasi for the schools, because when you go into a classroom you can't say, well, I only want to survey every third kid. No, you have to survey all the kids, because what are the other kids going to do? Just sit there and watch the others take a survey? So for that design you may need quasi. And so, but in a true experimental sort of setting for medicine or improving medical drugs, that type of thing, a lot of the times you're going to find the true experimental sort of designs. Okay. Single subject experimental research, very, you're going to see this in situations like in the prisons, or maybe like in special education, where you're doing research on one particular individual over time. Generally, these are longitudinal studies, because you're following one subject over time. Here, as you see, the time changes here, and you're able to capture behavior across time for this one individual, to be able to see effect, change, positive or negative change. The quantitative process, you go from the lit review to the statement of the problem, developing your hypotheses, developing your research design, collecting and analyzing data, and your conclusions. Types of qualitative, you have narrative. Narrative research really details and depends on sort of collecting stories and being able to reformat, repackage those stories to be able to tell them in the best way that you know how to present the research subjects, the participants, in the best light possible. You have ethnographic research. This is really comes out of the field of anthropology, where an anthropologist may go into a setting for 6, 8, 10, 12 months and really truly understand the complexity of the cultural phenomenon in the culture that he or she is in. Okay, you have case study research, and in case study research, you need sort of parameters. So, say this is the university farmland, right? And we're studying corn. We're studying Fresno State corn. There's the fields. We can't go beyond the fields to study Fresno State corn. We must study them within those fields, and we may need qualitative or quantitative research to be able to understand sort of why Fresno State corn is so good. But nevertheless, there's always a field involved, sort of parameters that are involved in a case study. Action research depends on, this is sort of continual. You may start with a plan, and from that plan you may act on that plan. Then you go and you observe the actions, you reflect on those actions, and then you modify the plan. And once again, after the modification of the plan, you go back to act again. So it's continual. Depends on if you're looking at continuous improvement of programs and that type of thing. It's going to be a continual process here. The quantitative process: lit review, statement of the problem, developing the research design, collecting data, analyze it, and theoretically grounding and interpreting your findings. We're going to talk about theory, and this is the theory. Quantitative also has theoretical underpinnings, but in qualitative it is fundamental that there's a theoretical foundations to the work, and then your conclusions. Basic types of research, the classifications: you have basic. This is done in a lot of the research universities, and then you have applied. This is really sort of applying, see if the research that exists works in a particular setting. Evaluation research, to be able to understand sort of products, services, programs, and the effectiveness of those programs, products, etc. And research and development happens a lot in industry. If you're trying to improve a car, make it better, all aspects of life and and products, you have to do research and development. The ethics. We'll talk a little bit about this. I don't believe we're covering this chapter in class, but you do have sort of the Institutional Review Board. If you Google, human subjects, Fresno State, you're going to get sort of our review board, and the size of our review board. They approve all research that requires interaction with human subjects, whether it's surveys, whether it's interviews, whatever it may be. At Fresno State, in the School of Ed, we have Institutional Review Board at the school level, at the Kremen School level, and then at the university level. Then you have your informed consent form required when collecting data from individuals, and I do have samples of that for you to see. Protection from harm. This is, you protect all participants from harm when you're interacting with them. You protect anonymity and confidentiality of participants, and you do not do deception. So I'm going to put a tilde, no deception, and that's what the IRB looks for, to make sure that you're not trying to deceive your participants. Gaining entry to a site to do research. It's necessary for any type of research where you're collecting data from human subjects. Yes, an IRB is needed. Approval of site leader, whether it's a principal, a CEO, whatever it may be. You need an informed consent form, and if you're doing research with participants under the 18, you do need parent permission, and this is called an assent form. In addition to a consent form, you need an assent form. And you can Google assent form for research, and you can get samples of what that is. So I'm providing a consent form for Module 1 and also an IRB application for you to look at in case you're curious. Thank you very much.